We are recording. Awesome.
Excellent.
If you're just joining us, we'd love to know who's in the room, so feel free to introduce yourself in the chat window while we're waiting to get started. Maybe that looks like everyone, so I think we can go ahead and get started if our panelists are good with that. So welcome everyone. I'm Eileen Coombs, the Community and Education Lead at Delegate Solutions, and I'll serve as your MC for today. We are thrilled to have you all with us. We offer these sessions about once a quarter, and I'm looking forward to today's topic in particular around onboarding. You've got a great who, now what? So before I introduce our panelists, I want to make sure that if you have any questions throughout today's session, to encourage you to throw those into the Q&A function of Zoom, and I'll monitor those and make sure that we get those questions answered at the end of our session. So without further ado, I'll introduce our panelists. I'll begin with Shannon Waller. She is the Director and Teamwork Coach at Strategic Coach. She's the creator of the Entrepreneurial Team Program and also co-authored the best-selling book, Unique Ability 2.0 Discovery. Is author of the Team Success Handbook and most recently wrote Multiplication by Subtraction. A key decision maker at Strategic Coach and a recognized entrepreneurial team expert, Shannon is a sought-after speaker, presenter, and coach.
Thank you.
We also have with us today Alec Broadfoot. He is the CEO and visionary at Vision Spark. Through Vision Spark, Alec engages mid-market companies across the country in hiring training, key leader searches, behavioral interviewing, and personality assessment. He has become a trusted, sought-after resource for business owners and leaders who want to improve their hiring practices and employ top performers. Having established himself as a strategic hiring expert in Columbus and across the Midwest, Alec frequently gives presentations on better hiring practices. And last but not least, I want to introduce the visionary and founder of Delegate Solutions, Emily Morgan. Emily and her fully distributed team help leaders and their teams to strategically clear their plate so they can focus on higher impact activities. She is the designer of the Delegate Freedom System, which helps leaders delegate in a repeatable, reliable way. She's also the author of Let It Go, an Amazon bestseller. Emily speaks nationally on the topics of delegation, remote workforces, and entrepreneurship. So as you can see, we are in great hands today with this topic. I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing more on how to create a commitment to a company's success by retaining really great talent and building confidence in our employees. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon to get us started today.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. I love this conversation. Who Not How has been such a phenomenal platform for just really helping to elevate all of us. And no matter actually so if you're owner, business owner, visionary, entrepreneur, this will make complete sense. But also if you're a member of a team, you're like, oh, that's what I needed to know. So we're really excited today to really create. So obviously you have to get some great who's to make this work. But then also we have to be able to get them up to speed. How can you do that fast? How can you do it well? How can you do it if they're remote? How can you make sure that you are actually setting them up for success? Because not only is getting people kind of a challenge right now, but so is keeping them. So Who Not How goes beyond the book, if you think about it that way. So Who Not How, this is the concept. This is the mass market book that we have, which is also a national bestseller. We're super excited about that. And this is kind of, we're kind of doing the real life deal. All right, so when we look at Who Not How, I'm going to quickly walk through the model because this is true for everybody. There's you, and then you have an idea of a future that is bigger and better than what you are currently experiencing. And then what happens is you think, oh, how do I do that? That is a natural response. Raise your hand if that's how you normally think about things. And then as soon as you think about how do I do it, you're like, if you already knew how to do it, you'd be doing it. So all of a sudden there's like a drop in energy. There's like, it's taxing. You go to the bottom of the learning curve and it's just no fun. And in fact, it's kind of exhausting. There's a sense of increasing fatigue and it's taking you off what you are already, we would say, kind of at least excellent, maybe even unique in strategic coach terms. All of a sudden you're going down to something you have no skill, talent, and possibly ability for. That does not look like fun. But we can ask ourselves another question. Instead of asking ourselves, how do we do it for yourself? who else already knows how to do this? For whom is it a passion? For whom did their eyes light up when they get to do this activity? It's not a drag. They're at the top of the learning curve, not the bottom like we would be. So you're going to ask yourself, who do I know, or who can I find that knows the how? And all of a sudden, you have dramatically accelerated your progress, because it's and this actually came from a great conversation between Dan Sullivan and the brilliant Gene Jackson. It goes, I don't start with who I start, or I don't start with how, I start with who. And it's like, oh. So that's exactly what we're doing. So there's increasing energy when you work with who's, and you know this. There's some activities you're like, yes, that's mine, and other ones you're like, is there a way I can not do that? And instead of beating ourselves up and thinking that, oh, we should be able to do it, no, find the who, figure out how to work really, really well and collaborative with them, and then go. And you will get your bigger, better result so much faster, and you don't have to do the how. So that's the whole premise of this context. So I'd like to kind of review the why, who, not how came from. And what's nice is it puts a very different energy behind delegating. Delegating looks like work sometimes, although Emily, you have done a brilliant job of making it so much easier and repeatable and a system. So smart. But all of a sudden, when you realize, oh, I'm delegating to somebody who's better at it than I am, all of a sudden you're like, oh, then it gives you all this freedom to just let go of stuff you actually didn't want to do anyway. But then, so when you're hiring, which Alec will go into more detail with, then what? How does this work? How do you get them up to speed quickly? So that's really what we're going to focus on today. So if you want to go to the next slide. Great. So one of the things that we do, Strategic Coach has been around for incorporated in 1988. So getting up there. And I've been with Coach since 91. So we have hired a lot of people over that time frame. And fortunately, we had some very systematic people come on board and actually put together a system for how we orient people. And this is not going to be a download. So if you like this image, please take a screen cap right now, because that's how you're going to keep it. So and the point being, I'm not going to go through all of the details, but we make sure that people are set up when they come in. They feel known, they feel welcomed. So we've got, phase 1 the week before, organize supplies, prepare office space, inform the team. There's nothing worse than showing up and someone goes, who are you? Yeah, that's not cool. So you want to just do those bare basics. When I first started Coach, I was hired by another salesperson, and there was a very small administrative office. And when I came in, Susan Aldridge, who hired me, Dan was out on sales calls, which was good because we didn't have a bigger office then. I was the 6th person on board, but she had a desk set up for me. I brought my own computer. That's how small we were. But she had my Post-it notes set out. She had pens and pencils. She had a little welcome thing. She had a mug. Like, even though it was bare bones, I felt so warmly welcomed and cared about because she had taken the time to arrange it and make sure that I felt cared for. So that was pretty cool. So you've got the phase 2 the day before. And we're going to talk about the training schedule. Actually, the first day, the first 2 weeks, the 3 to 12 weeks, the first quarter of the training and making sure someone gets up to speed, the first review, and then what's next beyond the first 3 months, because you want to accelerate the success pattern of this person. You can't just go, great, you're here, figure it out, bye, which some of us might be tempted to do. So I want to give you another shot of actually what the schedule looks like. And we pre-populate their calendar before they come in. You can actually set their email address. It's a great trick from my friend Nick Sonnenberg. You create their email address well before they come in, and you start sending them emails. You start sending them calendar invites so that they're actually booked and scheduled, and all of a sudden they show up and they're a fully participating member. So again, another screen cap if you like this. So it kind of tells you how we do it. We also really like to take people out for lunch. And we will do a virtual lunch if they're remote or if we're remote at the time. So that just really works. So they get to know some of the other team leaders and kind of really get to feel like there's a community. They're not just on their own. And with remote, that's super important. So we'll send an Uber Eats, little coupon, and they can order their meal, and then we'll get together on screen and go, well, we're so glad you're here. And then hopefully we'll also have some in-person events where we get to connect with people too. So that's what that looks like. I will just go back one sec, Emily. It was really funny. Babs and I were talking about this the other day. So Babs and Dan co-founded Strategic Coach. And so I was used in my previous role of working through lunch, because my entrepreneur would work till all hours. She would come in later, but then she would work till 7, 8 o'clock, and she never took lunch. So the very first day I'm at Coach, Bab goes, "It's lunchtime." And I go, I know, I'm going to work. She goes, "No, it's lunch." And out she takes me for lunch. Yeah, food is fairly important at Coach if you've ever been there. All right, so we actually, so one of the key things I want to leave you with, and this is something you can download. We'll share the link in a little bit. Is one of the things that we do that I think is particularly special and really works, because people come into a new job and, as I've been talking about, they're at the bottom of the learning curve. And it is scary. There's so much new to learn. There's people's names, there's the technology, there's just the culture, the code, all the stuff that we take for granted because we've been there for a while or we created it. So, we actually want people to set up with a habit of what we call the positive focus. And the positive focus is reflecting on what are your 5 wins for the day in this example. And we actually want them to create a habit. So as Dan says, you're 100% disciplined to your existing set of habits. So let's get them started on reflecting on their progress from the get-go. And what it simply looks like is a page where every day for the first 21 days, and my latest hire, I'm like, "Where's your 21-day positive focus?" I'm like, "Oh, it's like, I didn't get it." I'm like, "Go get it right now." Get one from so-and-so, because it's so important. So it can be something super simple. If they're in person, it's like, "Oh, I learned how to use the photocopier. I remembered so-and-so's extension. I didn't get lost on the way to my office." It can be really basic. And what we do is we have the new hire share this with their team leader. Now, here's the job of the team leader. So if you're doing this, please take this to heart. You do not evaluate or judge what they wrote down. It can look like something so simple to you. Doesn't matter. The point of it is that they are tracking their progress. And I have to tell you, for people getting up to speed and feeling confident, which, by the way, is the point at which they will be contributing, if you can accelerate that process and take out some of the pain points by having them then do the 21-day positive focus, you are so far ahead of the game. And you're just going, "Yay, you learned that. Fantastic. Good. What did you learn? What did you learn the next day? What did you learn the next day?" So it's just the fact that they are filling it out is what matters, not actually what they write in it. Obviously, you're looking for some work things, but you're not there to judge or evaluate. You can ask, "Hey, are there any questions? Something that's still confusing?" Great. Hopefully that's going to be in the next couple of days on your positive focus. So it's just a simple, looks deceptively simple exercise, but incredibly powerful to get people up to speed quickly. So again, we'll be sharing the link for how you can download this for yourself. Anyway, I wanted to share that one little hack because I have to tell you, and with my latest hire, whose name is Chris and whom I absolutely adore, it has worked brilliantly. So don't skip it. It's very easy because we have cursive knowledge and we don't know what we know. If you help them ramp up and get to speed quickly, you're going to have a who that is really productive, confident, and making a difference and really maximizing your investment. So enjoy that, please. Okay, over to you, Alec. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And I know the chat function is not enabled right now. We're working on it, so we'll keep you posted on that. So I want to talk about onboarding from onboarding leaders. And Gallup came out with a survey a couple of years ago, and this was spot on with my own unscientific research. But they said that 82% of the time, companies fail to choose the right manager. 82% of the time. If we reverse that, that's really 2 out of 10 that they're successful with. So onboarding alone is not enough to overcome a bad hiring decision. So I want to echo that. So just a review on how to hire effectively. So Emily, if you want to go to the next slide, is that you want to have a hiring process. I know companies have customer acquisition processes and manufacturing processes. You have processes all throughout your organization. Do you have a hiring process? So that is vital. Strong interviews. Interviews with their situational, descriptive, behavioral interviews, and then having a high quality assessment. So if you introduce a high quality assessment to your interview process, you more than triple your success rate of choosing the right person. So there's really good assessments out there. I have a couple favorites myself, but that is going to help you here. So Emily, if you want to move to the next slide. So another thing for effective onboarding is we want to have our view of that new hire, that new leader, that new employee. They are not a cost, they're not an expense, but they are an investment. So if you're hiring a key leader, you want to think about them as an investment and how can I maximize my return on that investment. So number one is communication. This is really important. So we're pretty successful with helping our clients hire great integrators, COOs, and leaders. And years ago, it was a myth. When you hired a key person, I would reach out to the visionary and I would say, how's Joanne doing? And they'd be like, I really don't know. And I'm like, well, did you tell them how you're going to measure their performance? And they would push back and they would say, at this level, I shouldn't have to. And that's a myth. You have to tell them what success looks like, how you're going to hold them accountable, what performance is going to be measured, and give them goals 90 days, 180 days, and 360 days. So communication is key in holding them accountable and successful onboarding. So the other important thing is time. So have them shadow you. So let's say you're hiring an integrator, second in command, have them spend several days with you. Do daily check-ins for the first 2 weeks every day. Meet with them. How are things going? And then a weekly meeting. And that meeting initially could be several hours long. So a quick story. A friend of mine, Tom, decided his business was in a good spot. Tom did all the business development for his business, and he had someone running it. And he decided to move to a lake house a few states away from Ohio where I'm at. And Tom called me one day, and he was devastated. He had hired a salesperson to take over to help with that revenue that he was responsible for, and the sales were plummeting. And he's like, Alec, what do I do? And after uncovering some things, Tom shared with me that he was only meeting with this salesperson once a week on a Friday for 30 minutes. And this person was responsible for 100% of the revenue of the company. So needless to say, that person didn't work out. He hired a new person and made sure that he had a very involved orientation, training, and weekly cadence. John is my integrator. I hired John a year and a half ago, and we meet once a week. And we used to meet about 4 hours a week. I just left the afternoons on Friday open. And we still meet once a week. It's about an hour and a half. But that is super important to have time with your key leaders. So communication and time are super important.
Alec, can I jump in? Because
yes.
you talked about profiles, and one of the interesting, and I'm a huge fan, we have these conversations often between us, and it's really interesting because you can really support someone, A, being known, but also knowing themselves better when you meet with them and when you review their progress to say, hey, I really want you to use your strength here. This situation is going to require your talent from this particular area. I'm really counting on you for that. And you can use the profiles that you've hopefully used. I would never hire in a million years without using profiles. You're just guessing. It's worse than trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's trying to find a needle in a haystack in the dark if you do not use profiles. Yeah. Just saying. So, but what I found really fun is to say, oh, I can see you're using your strength over here, your talent over here. Here's how your mental energy is playing out. I'm really counting on you for this. And they go, they'll never in a million years before have been coached or trained or encouraged like that. So those tools that you use at the beginning, don't drop them. They're incredibly useful. Yes. And then you can use them in your same page meetings. You can use in your weekly cadence when you're doing the positive focus. It's an amazing tool to help support someone's growth and development. And again, to help you maximize that impact and that investment, because you don't want it to be a cost. Yes. Right. By the way, there's good investments or bad investments. We've all done both, but they are never a cost. So anyway, just wanted to tie that in because I think it's really key.
That's a great reminder. Having that assessment and going over the results of that assessment once they're hired. You don't want to do it before they're hired, but once they're hired, you want to go over those results, share with them their strengths. This is going to help communication. It's going to help with productivity in your company. You're going to know what to delegate to them, what not to delegate to them. So that's super important. And then I would recommend a review of that profile 90 days, 6 months later. And, that will definitely impact the retention of that particular employee. So employees want to feel cared about. And so that's super important, that they know that you care about them both personally and professionally. So Gallup has the Q12 survey. I love the survey. I find that it answers a lot of questions. So the next slide has 12 it has all 12 questions here. So number one, I know was expected of me at work. That's super important. They need to know how they're going to be, how to be a great top performer for you. The second one is I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right. This is super important. I go out of my way to make sure they have a very comfortable chair. They have a desk converter. It's like $125 on Amazon if they want to stand. A secondary monitors, maybe another $150 or so. But having the equipment and the work environment they want, making sure their computer works and is efficient. I found out a key employee of mine on my leadership team, I didn't realize his laptop was like 4 years old and it wasn't working well. I'm like, that's it. We're, say no more. We're getting a new laptop. So those things will impact someone's frustration on the job. And so you want to go out of your way to make sure they can do their job really well. In the last 7 days, I've received recognition or praise for doing good work. That's really important. My supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. So these 12 questions, I'm not going to go through the rest of them now, but these 12 questions are key for employee engagement. About 30% of employees are engaged, 70% are disengaged. So this is going to help you as a manager, and I would have your other managers on your team to have this front and center. This will really help with onboarding and retention. So the last point that I would like to make is that an effective hiring strategy plus a strong onboarding and retention strategy equals a top performing team. Mm-hmm. We have a couple of things that we would, if you would like us, we can email to you. One is a scorecard for Are You Ready for a Second in Command? It's a 5-minute questionnaire, and then an onboarding checklist. And then if you want to reach out or have any questions for me or someone on my team, onboarding is key for great hires, top performing teams, great culture, and we don't want to abdicate that or forget about it.
Alec, this is incredible. I'm like salivating as I'm looking at that list. That's like incredible. And I love your new hire onboarding for success. As I was reminded, it's not only their technology, and especially if they're a remote worker, make sure they've got really good internet. You can probably help with that. Like it's those basic things. Super fun, quick story that one of our, Dan Sullivan was sharing goes, one of our clients owned several McDonald's franchises.
Yeah.
Actually,
I think that was me. I think that was me. I shared that story.
Okay, sorry, I'm stealing it from you and giving
Go ahead.
credit. Can you tell that story? Because that was amazing.
So it was about 15 years ago. I was meeting with one of the top McDonald's franchises in the country.
Yes.
And I said, how do you handle that massive turnover in your company? Is like, actually, our franchises have the least amount of turnover out of the entire country. And I said, well, you're just paying them more than market? And he's like, no. He's like, we realize that people leave their jobs because the fryer's not working, the catchers are not working, they don't have the equipment they need. And so we go out of our way to make sure everything is working and they're comfortable doing their job well. And so he had, I think, a 14% turnover, where I think the industry is like 60%, something crazy like that.
McDonald's average I heard is 300%.
There you go. That's what it was. Yeah.
Which is crazy. So, I mean, I'm sorry, totally should have remembered. I thought it might have been you. I'm used to giving credit to Dan. Shouldn't have. But it's like McDonald's. Like holy mackerel. So if McDonald's can get their stuff working right, we can get our stuff working right. And if you're not the person to do all that setup, there's a who for that, right? There's someone else who will go to that level of attention to detail. It's not going to be me. I'll forget something, but you can definitely who that up as well. Thank you, Alec. That is such fabulous information. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, Emily.
Who it up. I love that. I already wrote down like 3 things that you guys shared that I want to bring back to my team. So thank you
Nice.
for sharing your knowledge. So I'm going to close this out by talking about how we can incorporate some of these onboarding strategies for hires that we make that might be remote. My company, Delegate Solutions, has been remote for over 15 years now, and we were designed that way from day one to work remotely. So long before COVID, back in the day when I was, stomping on the soapbox about why remote work can work, it's just been really interesting to watch the normalization of remote work and to see that workforce really evolve. But, even though it's starting to integrate more, we've been remote. We've got about 50 employees. Everybody works from home across the country and always from remotely. So I wanted to share a little bit of tips around how we help onboard remote hires and integrate them into the culture. And then also how you can really use delegation as one of the key tools to make a really great impact with the who that you hire.
Mhm.
So I wanted to share a quick story about some of my new people that I've hired, my new who's, because they're all 3 remote. And so I made these 3 key hires in the last quarter. And while it's fresh, I just wanted to share a little bit around what worked. So 2 of these people, John, Allie, and Christine, are leadership team members, and 1 is one of our sales hires. So I spent a large part of last quarter in recruiting mode. I was working with Alex's team and others to really find the right people to bring into the company. And so John is in Orlando, Allie's in Minneapolis, Christine's in Harrisburg, and I'm in New Jersey. And so John, for example, was living in Atlanta, but he really wanted to test out living in Florida. And so while I know that he was really excited about the job, he was even more excited about being able to do it from anywhere. So one of the key drivers to be able to attract like really unique talent that has worked well for us is being remote by design and being set up to do that indefinitely. So this has allowed us to bring in really top caliber who's.
Yeah. And you're not limited to the 30, 40 miles around you, right? All of a sudden your geography gets really big.
Yeah, I mean, the talent that we were able to get in this last round of hires is exceptional and exciting. I know Eileen would agree with me on that. All 3 of them are like dynamos.
Yay.
Yeah, so while it's still fresh in my mind, and I'm not normally involved in the onboarding process, so it's been really interesting to kind of be part of that again and be able to bring that to you guys today. So one of the key things that I decided to do when I made the key leadership hires was to meet with them in person. So when I hired John, I flew down to Atlanta and I spent time with him, getting to know him personally before he came on board. And the ability to bring that human connection helped us create a really trusting foundation.
Nice.
And Allie joined our leadership team right before we had our annual in New York. So we got to spend a whole bunch of time together with her. But all of that really helped us solidify our relationship as a unit. And so the first tip that I want to share as you lead who's on the senior level is to make in-person time a priority. So while we've set up a work-life integration that's 99% remote, we also make time to get together in person to build rapport and trust and synergy. At all levels of the company, we also create agendas. So Shannon was speaking to this a little bit about what they do at Strategic Coach. Having run a virtual business for 15 years, I always say Zoom is my natural habitat because we literally have rooms dedicated to Zoom for all different meetings that you can think of. But if you're new who has not had a lot of experience working remotely, it can be really overwhelming to like come in and have to figure out where I'm going on Zoom. And so, or going into their calendar to figure all those things out. So what we did is create a 1-week agenda with all of the links to all of the Zoom rooms and the agendas and the scorecards and all of that just in one place. So like they're just having to look at that one thing for the week. So that's been really helpful to help reduce like the learning curve. And then the third thing that I recommend, having just gone through all this, is if your who is not billable, in that first week, you really want to establish a results-based work environment for them that has a lot of accountability and measurables that you can monitor in real time for their role. So you want to make sure that you work together to establish key metrics that you can monitor and make sure they're on track. And as one of your key activities for week 1, I heard Alec and Shannon both speak to this, is establish a weekly meeting cadence and use an agenda where you're looking at those metrics and issues to make sure you're on track in the moment and not having to sort of do cleanup.
Emily, what's an example of a metric for like John or Allie that you put in place? Because obviously what you expect them to do later on is going to be bigger, but what's a meaningful metric at the very beginning? Something that was important to you.
I mean, in Allie's case, she's managing our P&L. So she's looking at net income, net profit, COGS, things like that. And for John, like he's looking at, you know, how quickly we can launch accounts, how quickly we can bring on new team members, and Allie's job is to make sure the sales team is working with the service team and that there's cohesion and integration there. So it's really fascinating stuff, but I'm happy to share any metrics that we've used because I know as a leader, it's really helpful to get that feedback so you don't have to sit there and think about all that stuff. So if there's any
like for us with new salespeople, once they're on the phone, it's number of calls. I mean, that's pretty easy. But some of those backstage ones can be a little bit harder, but that's super useful. Thank you.
Yeah, and you're reminding me, I created a article a while back talking about metrics for non-C-level people, which is also something I don't see a lot of people talking about. So we have that as a resource too, if you're looking to create a scorecard beyond the leadership team.
Nice.
And of course, I can't move on without speaking to delegation. So in these meetings that you have with your key hires, you definitely want to ensure that you're also talking about delegation strategies with them, because as the leader, you have the opportunity to set up a culture of delegation in the company. And so I've gone so far as to even find ways for the leadership team to delegate 20% of their work every quarter so that they're focusing on their most impactful contribution. And we'll share some tools in the coming slides. So whether they're remote or sitting next to you every day, delegation really is the foundation for a highly optimized who and impactful who. So the best thing that you can do to keep your new hire engaged, whether they're together with you or in working remotely, is to keep them focused on wearing one hat. So helping them understand their unique ability. What is the most impactful contribution that they're trying to make? And you can build those activities into your onboarding relationship and an ongoing relationship with your who. So some remote culture ideas is really about intentionally designing it. So there really needs to be a clear communication plan in place when you're dealing with remote teams. And one of my old business coaches, Mark O'Donnell, used to say to us all the time, 7 times to hear it for the first time, right? So it's never more true than in a remote company. And there's so much work that as a leadership team, we put into just developing intentional and clear communication than you would normally have to do with the remote workforce. So the first step is really to understand how and when to communicate and get support. So check-ins are likely less frequent and they are more scheduled than in a traditional office environment. So we use a lot of tools like Slack, Harvest, Asana, and it's important that team members understand how to use each tool. So for example, how do they reach people? What's the expectation of response time? How often will they be meeting? Use some of this time to talk about expectations. So what's the availability required? What's it look like to have kids at home for work? How do you dress for Zoom? All those kinds of things. And because of the rigidity required to just communicate well in a remote setting, it's really important to intentionally design opportunities to just have casual communication and socialization. And one of the most critical things that we do as we're building out our remote teams was to establish a remote work protocol. And this document really provides clear parameters and expectations for all of our staff to ensure consistency. So how you're showing up on Zoom, how we're interacting daily, what communication expectations do we have? And this really helps us set great foundation from day one.
Emily, what number 2, you create spaces for casual socialization. Can you share some more about that? Give us an example.
Yep, I'm gonna do that in a couple slides.
All right.
Almost there, but I have a bunch that I'll share. Did you want to say something, Shannon?
No, I have the same question. I'm like, ooh, what does that look like? We've done, I certainly during the pandemic, we did, lunches. Sometimes we did like a wine time. We did some interesting things. So I'm super curious to hear how you do that.
Yeah, Eileen is at the heart of a lot of that, by the way, in her role. One more tip on remote culture that I'm actually going to steal from our new service leader, John, is that we like to set up and remove anxiety by having a really clear set of expectations. So
Yeah.
in this approach, like we share that one, we know that they want to make a good impression and that they want to do a good job. So our goal is really to eliminate anxiety around things that you should not do to jeopardize your job. And that really just helps alleviate some of that learning curve so they can relax and focus just on doing the work, right? So what are the things that will violate, them doing a good job for you?
I can't stress that enough, Emily. It's so, and to be super clear about that. So, I mean, you guys know we have a fun tool in Coach called the 4x4, and it's 12 ways they can be successful. And the 4 ways they could drive you crazy. And the things, and that's the danger zone. That's the, electrified fence. Do not touch that or you'll get zapped. And sometimes people can be doing a lot of things right, but if they do some things that drive you crazy, they're gone. And so really clarifying what the role, and so those are those thought bubbles above their head. I wonder if, and you don't want people trotting all over your unspoken rules because they're unspoken. So you want to get them overt, not just covert. You want to get them really obvious. And some of the things sometimes you're like, oh, I never really thought about it, but this is how we do it. Other times you're like, isn't that obvious to everyone? The answer is no, it's not. And so to make that super explicit, that's the better word, just calms everyone down and you won't get triggered and they'll be less anxious. So such a valid point. Thank you.
For sure. I give credit to John on that one. That's his share. Okay, so Alec, to your point of ways that we connect remotely, we have a really heavy focus on making a great first impression with our employees. And so in addition to the week 1 clickable agenda and meeting structure, there's a big emphasis on making them feel welcome and included in our remote community on day 1. So something that I don't see a lot of people doing that has worked really well is incorporating tactical components into the remote employee experience. So we do that by sending swag things in the mail to them in their first week. So like a welcome box, books, a sweatshirt, water bottles, all those things. And we're on our 2nd year now. We do a mailed newsletter, like just an internal company newsletter that gets mailed out once a quarter. That's real fun. It's tactile. So
it's real. It's paper.
Yes.
That is so cool. I love that.
It sounds like, simple, but it's actually like a needle mover, I think, for us, because it does create a real tactile experience for the employee. We do handwritten gratitude cards. So we send those out all the time. Eileen hosts something called Lunch Lady Eileen, right? That's what we call it, on Friday. And so on the first week for the new hire, like you guys were saying, we send a lunch gift card out to them and they can come and hang out and have lunch together, cafeteria style.
That's so good.
We also create spaces for casual socialization across all interests. So we do happy hours. We have a workout group that gets together and works out on Zoom. We have book clubs where we're reading the same books. On Slack, which is like really the hub of our remote business, there's a lot of channels for shared interests. Like we have a water cooler channel, Share the Love channel. That's where like they constantly are sharing all kinds of kudos and core values and things like that. It's like the most positive place you can ever look at in a business. It's so fun. And then we do virtual co-working. So let's say you come into Zoom and you can just sit there and do your work, but you're doing it very casually, talking with your teammates. And I'm always happy to share more of our best practices around remote teams. There's many more. Eileen is equally as equipped to speak to it as I am. And all that fun stuff, while intentional and very important to building a high functioning remote team, is really the icing on the cake of having a team of great who's. But I believe that your number one priority when you bring in your who is keeping them focused on making their most impactful contributions. So keep them delegating and elevating so you're getting maximum impact and ROI and keeping them motivated.
Such good information. Love it.
Thank you. In my book, Let It Go, I share a whole bunch of concepts and tools and diagnostics that you can use to create a great blueprint for setting up a culture of delegation. So we have a bottleneck diagnostic that helps you understand your own behaviors that might be holding you back or slowing down your team. And this quick 5-question survey helps you really create a common vocabulary that you can use to enhance the relationship and set boundaries together. We also have 2 other tools, Delegate Freedom Analysis and Elevated Week, which helps you and your who understand their impact areas in the first few weeks. And you can use this to show that you're invested in their success and making sure that they're having an impactful contribution. But all of these tools are shared in the book, and we'll be sharing links to them in the follow-up. And we're happy to be a resource on anything with delegation, letting go, or leading remote teams of who's. And back to you, Eileen.
No, that was, you all gave such great information. I have a bunch of notes, even though I knew some of what was coming today. So that was great. I just want to remind everyone, I apologize that we couldn't get the chat function working, but we will make sure to send all of the links and resources after the session today. So you will get that information in your hands. But if you have questions, please throw them into the Q&A and I'll be happy to answer them. I guess one of the questions I was kind of thinking about, Alec, you talked about some of the onboarding assessments that you appreciate as great resources. Can you share some of what those assessments are that you might recommend people consider?
Yeah, we use something, we call it the Vision Sparks Achiever. We're actually in the process of renaming that, but it's an excellent assessment for hiring the right person for the right seat. So it really helps making that decision and identifying areas of training and development. So it's more of a strengths and weaknesses kind of assessment. It's not something that you would use for a company retreat, but the information is valuable in terms of knowing who you're going to get, right? And so we tell our clients when you have this assessment, you're not going to be surprised by this person once they're onboarded. You're not going to say, who is that I interviewed? It's not the same person. You'll know everything about them, and maybe they're a little disorganized, maybe they are more big picture oriented and don't have that attention to detail. Maybe they have a high assertiveness. So it shares a lot of information that would help predict them in terms of their successfulness in the role and in communication with those around. So that's the assessment that we use. We recommend. It does a lot of it's a lot of bang for the buck. So there's three areas that assessments will measure, right? And Shannon knows this, and it's something that they talk about at Coach. There's the affective part of your brain, and that's where 90% of most assessments are. So DISC, Myers-Briggs, Predictive Index, Culture Index, Enneagram, Working Genius, there's 1,100 assessments. So that's where 90% of them are. Conative is your instinctive style, and that's where the Kolbe is. And I find that that's a great assessment for team building and really knowing who that person is. And then the third component is cognitive. This evaluates their mental aptitudes. So our assessment will do both cognitive and affective. It may venture into that conative, but not near what the Kolbe does. So that's a long answer to your question, Eileen.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
And just to jump in, when I first did the Achiever profile with Alec, it was so cool because it identified something that no other profile ever had. And that was that I would be an effective salesperson for a while, but not long-term. And so you told me that, I was like, how did you know? Because that's exactly, if you track my career, bang on. And no other profile had ever figured that out. So it does a brilliant job of the affective and the cognitive. And then if you add Kolbe to that, you've got, because I think you really do need to know the three parts of the mind. You need to know that they have some mental horsepower. You need to make sure, like if you're a fast decision maker, you're going to be really frustrated by someone who isn't. And some roles are totally fine, and that will work. Slow and steady wins the race. But other times, if they're working closely with you and you've got a fast brain, you need someone else around you with a fast brain. Then there's obviously personality, which is where everyone makes their hiring decisions, and it's not the most important thing. It's important, but if that's your only measure, and some of the profiles can change, so you're kind of dealing sometimes with a moving target. Like if it's still true, you're not really supposed to use Clifton Strengths before hiring. By all means, use it after, because it can change. So to use that as your only measure, not smart. And then, of course, knowing the cognitive, how someone's mental energy plays out, very important. If you're hiring and someone who has to deal with numbers all the time, and their mental energy, not brain power, but mental energy for specifics and details is short, they're going to be really general with your numbers. Might be creative accounting, but it's not going to be what you need, right? So just having all of those three parts of the mind is huge. And if you don't use them, your success rate is maybe 50-50. You add a profile in there, at least Colby's always said it goes to at least 80. So if you want to stack the odds in your favor, use profiles.
Thank you. Thank you. We do have a Q&A question from the audience, and I'm going to try to summarize it. So Christina, if I'm summarizing it incorrectly, just message and tell me. But she talks about that she finds leading virtual teams draining because there's just that lack of in-person sort of natural connections that happen, and she knows it's an area she needs to develop. I guess she's curious if we have any thoughts about how she can develop that and connect better with her virtual team. She's delegated that at this point.
I have a couple thoughts, but Eileen, I'm going to come back around to you because you live in this even more so than I do. So, like I was pointing out on my slides, like it's intentional, right? That's the big difference, is that in a virtual company, you have to intentionally design these strategies to create engagement and community. And so one of the things we've done is we start every meeting across the whole company with positive focus. So that's a strategic coach foundational idea. And that we just did it coming into this meeting. Like it's just natural. And it helps, like take a meeting that's just a standing meeting, but, allows you to have a little insight into who you're working with and what's going on with them. We do personal and professional. We score the meeting at the end to make sure that it's an effective meeting. But beyond that, there's just a lot of intentional things. So if it was me, I would pick maybe one thing that I want to start to implement with my team to build that community and rapport, and just commit to doing that one thing week over week until you feel stronger about it. But what do you think, Eileen?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think just creating those intentional moments and committing to them and creating that habit around them is important. The other thing I think that is when you're working with a virtual team, because you're not in person, you don't have the same nonverbal cues you would face to face. So I know in the interactions and relationships I've had with our team at Delegate, I have to be really intentional asking follow-up questions if I'm not sure they're on board or we're not connecting. And I have to be okay saying, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, or tell me more about that, just so that I can continue to dig deeper and really understand where they're coming from. So that just that kind of type of communication, you have to be a little more intentional about in the virtual space for sure. But I think too, creating those, as Emily mentioned, those opportunities for socialization where it's not all work is important, because in a normal office environment, you have that water cooler space to pop in and chat, and it doesn't happen as easily. So it is a little more effort, I think, in the virtual space. But I have found like our lunch lady sessions on Fridays, like I get to interact with team members I never get to interact with, and we don't talk about anything work related. We have the most random conversations, and I feel like that's where some of the deeper relationships have been built. So
yeah. And Emily, you've been remote since inception, right? So how long have you guys been a remote company?
Over 15 years.
Okay. So like what you're sharing, I see as gospel. Some of these companies, they've been remote for, maybe 3 years. and you've had, many more years to refine. And so I loved everything you were sharing.
Thank you.
Just to weigh in, one of my things, the thing that can be hard is when people, especially if they're new, they show up and they want to do their role really, really well. Right. And otherwise you didn't do a good hire, and then you should talk to, we should talk to Alec. But it's getting to know people personally that actually makes things flow. And so the positive focus, personal and professional, genius, Emily, to make, because that's how you get to know what actually matters to people. Like I can be in 8 meetings in a day and I do 8 different positive focuses because and people have, if they're in the same meeting, they have to come up with a new one, which is kind of fun. But then the people become multidimensional. Not just this singular little thing. I also, as you can probably tell, kind of try not to be just really static. Like I'm enthusiastic, I lean in, I'm curious. And kind of like when you're on screen, or pardon me, just even speaking, like if you ever do a podcast, you have to add a lot more intonation. Like you kind of have to make yourself come alive a little bit. And that encourages other people too. The other thing that we've done that I think would be helpful is we have challenges. So we just kicked off yesterday our 1-year challenge. I love the 1-year challenge. We have a very simple 1-year planner tool. And so that you need to meet with someone every quarter, or actually meet with a group, 3 to 4 people. My relationships with people from all over. So we've got people in Chicago and the UK. I'm based in Toronto. So we've got some people in LA. They're all over the map. One in the East Coast of Canada. So we're all over. And I have close relationships with people because we have gotten together in the 1-year plan. This is probably the 4th or 5th year we've done it. And I know what their goals are. So I'm like, hey, Faith, how's it going with your investment property? How the hell would I ever know that? She's on the tech team and 2 floors away when we're in person. Like that just never would have come up. But because we're in a 1-year goal challenge, I'll know those things, right? Which I just treasure about that. So we meet every quarter. I don't organize that because then it wouldn't happen. At the end of the year, as long as someone from the group, sends in, yes, we all met, then everyone who participates gets an Amazon gift card. There's not much I won't do for an Amazon gift card. I benefit, I get accountability partners, I get to help other people with their goals, and I get a little fun treat at the end. That is a win-win-win. So you're growing as a human, your teammates are growing, and you can probably help. And then there's an acknowledgement from the company. It's just a huge gift. And we do that with a lot of tools that we want people to do, be it the positive focus or some of our other great tools that we have at Coach. But those challenges are so fun for connecting people. And even if you're in person, but you have multiple offices, still do it. It's just one of those things that gets people connected at a very, not a surface level, but at a meaningful level. And I just think it's gold. So that's one of the things that we've done to really strengthen our remote teamwork, to get to know one another, not just in work, because we usually have 3 professional, but 2 personal goals. And I just, as you can tell, I love it. I'm like, I can't wait for my group to start.
Yeah, there's two other things we do that I think are easy wins that you could try too, Christina, to Shannon's point of let's find some easy things you can do. One is at the end of every year, every week we do a weekly team huddle. It's 15 minutes. We have an agenda. We rotate. If you can imagine 50 people on Zoom every single week, it's pretty crazy. But at the end of the year, we do a goals and gratitude focused huddle. And so we rotate through, and the team each gets a chance to share something they're grateful for, something, one of their goals for the year. So that's a neat way, just as a team, to get to know each other. And then on Valentine's Day and all year long, we do a share the love. What do we call it, Eileen?
I don't remember what we're calling it, an extravaganza this year, but I don't remember what we called it last year.
Yeah, but we have a share the love channel in Slack. And so all day long, the team is like sharing love for their teammates. And I mean, they have really deep, meaningful relationships together. And we've done that by putting them into small teams. And the different teams sort of really get close together. And then these other sort of extracurriculars let them interact in different ways.
We do something very similar. We have what we call Monkey and Bubble Awards. So bubbles are like big things. If someone saved a ton of money or made us a lot of money or fixed a big problem, we will do Bubble Awards. But we have Monkey Awards, and this refers to stock monkeys. Every company has their own quirky little culture thing. So we nominate people for monkeys, and it's exactly the same. It's share the love. And then we reflect it back to our core values. So I've got a little page over here with our core values in a cartoon form. And so positive and collaborative teamwork, when someone was alert, curious, responsive, resourceful, when they're focused on growth and results, and then when they provide an excellent first-class experience for our clients. So PAGE. So we'll do, like, this is the thing that was so fabulous. I nominated someone who just in 1 minute before a presentation made 2 really important changes, a typo and a missing slide, or better slide. And she'd never done it before. Was it a huge skill thing? No, but it was urgent and that's not normally her jam. And it was so fun just to nominate someone for a new capability, right? And it's just fun to be able to celebrate other people's growth and learn and development. So really having a forum for people to do that. We've got Community Scoop in our G chat. So yeah, just giving ways for people to communicate, which frankly can even happen if you have multiple floors in a building. You should still have these communication systems because they matter so much for connecting people.
They do. You remind me, we are just finishing up a core values challenge. So similar, but the team nominates others. And so we'll recognize that actually at our State of the Company tomorrow, our first winners of that challenge, which is a nice way to,
yeah it's like super fun.
Yeah, I love that. It looks like we are out of questions. Apparently we answered Christina's question. So I'm glad that
Great question.
Yeah, it was a great question. Is there anything else, panelists, that you want to share before I close us out? We've got a couple minutes.
Who, not how.
just who, not how. Gotcha.
Yeah. Remember that you're a great who, and so really appreciate your own strengths and talents and capabilities and passions. And when you do that well, your eyes are going to be open. Dan likes to say your eyes only see and your ears only hear what your brain's looking for. So when you're looking for great who's, which you can only do if you appreciate your own capabilities, you will find that. But then there's how do you knit everything together so that you can have really great teamwork. And I am so grateful for all the stuff I've learned today, screenshots I've taken of things, because we can always get better about creating that phenomenal organization where everyone gets to play to their strengths and everyone gets to be a great who. That is the pinnacle. So I'm super jazzed about the information and ideas and insights and wisdom that got shared today. So thank you, Eileen, so much for hosting. And thanks to our fabulous teamwork between Alec and Emily and myself. It's just been a joy to do this project.
Great partnership. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to our fabulous panelists, and thank you to all of you who joined us today. Again, we'll make sure that you receive all the links and materials that we shared throughout the presentation. And you'll also have our contact information in that same follow-up email if you have further questions. You'll also receive the recording as well. So thank you all, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.